Okay, so now from our early and delicious peppers, and these will produce right up until the end of the season. They flower all year, they produce good fruit. They are mostly picked when green, but if you let them ripen, they turn a pretty like goldeny orange to red. With most peppers, you can allow a green pepper to ripen and it will always turn a color. The only thing that can happen is sometimes if the pepper sits on the vine too long, it's susceptible to getting some end rot or to having some insect boring damage. So if you're allowing your peppers to color up by leaving them on long, check them very frequently because you may want to keep an eye out for any discoloration or any boring holes, and if that happens, pull them right off and take them in and cut the bad spot out and enjoy eating them. So in this part of the garden, we have some fruit. We have some strawberries, and I played around initially with strawberries that were considered everberrying, where they would berry multiple times a year, and what I found is they were very, very tasteless. So I went back to the typical or more typical June-bearing variety, and they're sweet and delicious, and we enjoy them once a year, but that's about it. And with strawberries, the plant that you plant the first year, see the strawberry box is layered? There's a little bit of a technique with strawberries. The first year plants will produce berries, and then they send these runners out, and these runners come down, and of course I've chosen one that's got a little bit of dieback in it, but these runners come down and then they reroot at the lower level, and next year it's the runners that will actually produce the fruit, and you can remove the plants that were there the previous year because they're not going to be very productive, and then when next year's runners start to produce runners, or this year's runners start to produce runners next year, you pop them back into the top, and you're constantly cycling layers of fruiting in your strawberry bed. So just bear in mind that your plants that you planted this year may not produce large substantial fruit next year. It will be the little pieces that are the offshoots that will be most productive. Here we have another grape, and this is a muscadine that's a white muscadine, and it's called Carlos. And you can see lots of grapes hanging on this guy. And here again, we are going to have to be netting because as they start to ripen, the birds will come and take them from us. And there is just not enough in this size garden to go around. And then here we have some blueberry bushes, and there are 6 of the variety that are a rabbit eye. That means that, unfortunately, this is a gross description, but that their fruit looks like rabbit eyes, about that size, and they are a variety called Tiff Blue. And I initially was told by our grower that in order to have enough blueberries to make it worth your while to grow them, that you need to put at least 5 plants in. So we put 6 plants in. And then in learning about blueberries, I found a few things. One, they absolutely must have acidic soil in order to produce and be healthy. And that takes some time to create because you have to slowly modify the soil. And you can put sulfur in as an additive, but you have to be careful because that can start to burn the root system. So you need to do it very, very small increments. And then the other thing you can do if you want to do it a little more organically, and this is what I do, is I save all of my coffee grounds and all of my citrus, and so the lemon rinds and the coffee grounds, and I collect them over a period of about a month, and this is pretty gross, and that's a bucket full, and then I put that around the base of them, and over a period of years that will change the acidity in the soil and make these plants a little healthier. These are 3-year-old plants that have been in the ground for 2 years. The first year I had them in the pots and in that soil that came from the nursery. It was wonderful because it had been amended just for blueberry growing, and I had these great blueberries, and then I put them in the ground, and the next year they were kind of mediocre. And I guess maybe this is even 4 years because last year they were terrible. And that's when I started to really look at what had to happen with the soil. And another thing that came to my attention was that they suggest you use multiple varieties of blueberries because that cross-pollination is supposed to increase the amount of production as well. And you have to be careful though, because blueberries, different varieties will bloom at slightly different times of the year. And if you're going to use 2 varieties that you want to cross-pollinate, you have to make sure that you're choosing varieties that will bloom at the same time. And so there's some tricks to the trade on this. And so this year we introduced a couple more blueberries. There's one here and there's one on the other side. And those are both similarly blooming. They bloom at exactly the same time, and we'll see what happens during next year if that gets a little bit better. So here's the the queen of the garden, the fig tree. And this fig is, it's not a typical fig. I purchased it many years ago, and I wish I had saved the tag. It's a patio fig. It was a dwarf variety that was designed to be kept even in a large pot. And we had kept it potted because we were living in downtown and we were living in the commercial side for a number of years and didn't have a garden space. And so we kept it in a pot for about 15 years. And it did just fine. It stayed very compact, and we would have some fruit, and maybe 10 fig a year. And then we put it in the ground about 5 years ago, and it's gotten a little more vigorous than I had expected. So we're going to need to prune it after it finishes fruiting this year. But you can see that the fruit is just coming in, and it is absolutely loaded with figs. And we're starting to see a little bit of maturity on some of them. And that's going to make a liar out of me. There's one down there that's starting to get a little plump, and they get a bit of a golden color to them. And this will also have to be netted because we will absolutely have birds in this very quickly, and they will not necessarily eat the fruit. They just pick holes in all of the fruit, and then you have to share your fruit with the birds. Here's one that looks like it's ready, and you can see that the bird thought it was ready too. And so they've taken what they want. Of course, they don't finish it. They just peck holes in all of the fruit. And so we'll take these couple off, and I try to pick them a little bit early because the birds aren't eating them if they're a day or so early, and this will ripen on the kitchen counter or on the windowsill and be delicious by tomorrow morning. They ripen very quickly once you pick them. So as we come through here, we have, let's talk about the melons. This is a variety of watermelon, and it's growing, there's the tomato, and you can't see the watermelon as well. Here we go. It's growing on the trellising. I grow a lot of our cucurbits up and off the ground to prevent disease and keep some air circulation going. And this is a sugar baby watermelon. And sugar baby will get to, maybe a basketball size. And so as that grows, in order to keep it from tearing off the vine there, we'll go ahead and sling it. And you use a pair of old stockings or a cheesecloth or something that just allows some water to penetrate and allows the plant to breathe, but it'll give it a little bit of support. And then on the side here, this little leaf, it's this leaf right here. That's what they call the spoon leaf. And one of the theories about ripeness is that you can tell when your watermelon is ripe because the spoon leaf will die and fall off. So it's really a challenge with melons to decide when it's the right time to pick them. And I think that everybody who grows melons is faced with this sort of dilemma. Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? And we're going to try and follow the spoon leaf theory. There's another theory about the color. If they're on the ground, the side that's down usually goes from a white to a yellow color, if I'm thinking about that correctly. And they say that when it gets quite yellow on the bottom side there, that it's ready to be picked. So if you saw yellow and a missing spoon leaf, you might be able to say, yeah, that's good to go. The other thing that we're growing over here is, and this might be worth looking at, this is the beginnings of a brand new watermelon coming, and that's how it looks after the fruit has been fertilized. You'll see that there'll be a flower, and the flower will open, and then there'll be male flowers on the plant and female flowers on the plant, and the bees will come through, or other pollinators, wasps and flies and all kinds of things pollinate for us, and they'll come through and land in the flower of one and move to the flower of another, and then they create that pollination that's necessary for a fruit to develop. And if you have a female flower and it starts to have the beginnings of fruit, but it doesn't get pollinated, then that little piece of fruit will rot and fall off. Now, it looks like by the growth development on this that it has been pollinated and it will be seeing some fruit coming. So I'm going to climb through here, and here we're going to look at something that's a bit of a problem. Most cucurbits are going to have difficulty with this bug right here. This is a Mexican bean beetle, and it will eat through the leaves. When you see lacing of the leaves, see this little bit of lacing that's happening here? That is the damage from a Mexican bean beetle, and darned if that guy didn't just fly away before I was able to kill him. And look at that. This is one nemesis after another. Here we go here. This is a leaf roller, and this is going to be a worm. And look at that. Now, that's something that you definitely want to get rid of. And again, they fell on the ground before I was, here it is, I'm going to get this guy. All right, so now what I would do typically with this is feed them to the chickens, but because I'm not going to take the time and walk across the yard while we're filming, I'm going to mush him. And so you look for rolled leaves, which is indicative of a leaf roller, and you look for this lacing in your leaves of your cucurbits, which would be indicative of having some of the bean beetles. And then there's another very serious problem that we have with our cucurbits, and that is called squash bugs. And squash bugs look like stink bugs, and they will decimate the leaves. And the squash bugs lay eggs, and so do the bean beetles on the underside of the leaves. They eat from the top and they lay eggs on the bottom, and the eggs of the bean beetle are clusters of little tiny yellow dots, and then the eggs from the squash bug, they look more like little tiny brown or black dots underneath the leaf. And so if you see that, you know you've got a leaf that's got a bunch of eggs on it. Pull it off and make sure it goes in the garbage can. If you have chickens, you can feed them to the chickens. It's good protein. So the cucurbits have been a little slow in my yard this year, and I don't have a whole lot of production of fruit yet, but we do have some flowering, and it looks like we're going to be able to get some female flowers coming out here soon, and I've got some melons coming, but it's taken its time. Here's a little, this is a cantaloupe. Let's see if we can see that over there. There's another little melon coming. Now this variety of cantaloupe is kind of interesting. It comes from France, and I'm not going to try and butcher the name because I was a Spanish student and not a French student, but it's very interesting because this is a melon that the French came to Monticello, and it was at Thomas Jefferson's place, and they fell in love with it. It's about a softball size cantaloupe, and they enjoyed it, and they took seeds back and they brought it to France and they renamed it, and they named it with something of America in the name, and now we have it back here as a French melon and are enjoying it again. It's enjoying a revival. It actually had become quite scarce here. Aha, I see the bug. Let's see if we can get that bean beetle. Now, one thing that the bean beetles tend to do is they drop, and that's their defense mechanism. If they are disturbed, instead of staying on the leaf, they drop off of it, and that's how. Okay, so we're going to destroy this guy. Unfortunately, it's not pleasant, but it is very necessary because they will develop exponentially. They will lay eggs, and they will become something that will just completely wipe out your plants. And just so that everybody is aware of how frequently this has to be looked at, I check them in the morning, I check them midday, my husband comes home from work and he checks them. It requires at least 3 or 4 outings a day to the cucurbits in order to keep these under control. And if you allow an adult to mature and develop an egg, then develop eggs, then you really have something that gets out of control fast. And as I was talking about the squash bugs, amazing how I can go out here and not see all of this happening at once, but lucky us today, we can see all of it happening at once. That is on an iris blade, but it's on an iris blade that is by cucurbits, and this is a squash bug. Got him. Okay, so you can see it really looks a lot like a stink bug, and it's climbing away, and I'm gonna take a minute and get him. Hello. Because when they're at this size, this is not a pupa stage, this is an adult stage, and that guy is going to be laying eggs, and very quickly they will decimate your cucurbits.